NBA free agency and the draft have come and gone with only a few notable names remaining on the free agent market. So we are going to give you our 5 best off seasons from NBA teams, deep diving which squads better position themselves for the 2025 season. And you are not going to want to miss any of it. And all of this is coming up next on the Brick House. What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Brick House, partner of the House Call Sports. I'm here with Joe. My name is Matt, and today we are talking the best off seasons from NBA teams before the 2025 season officially begins. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that is Lids. Lids.com is the #1 place for all teams, all styles, all brands. There's hats, there's shirts, there's jerseys, and there's much more from official leagues and brands. They ship free to any store or on $50 orders online, and they've got new codes up every day because they are trying to save you some money. I can't even tell you how many hats I've got from Lids in my life. Their brick and mortar store in the 5th Avenue Mall in Anchorage, Alaska was a staple of my childhood, and now their website is a staple of my adulthood. So hit the link in the description to get your favorite team's favorite gear at Lids. Lids, any team, anytime, anywhere. Now, it is time for some NBA offseason discussion, as we have seen many impactful changes this offseason. Among others, we saw Paul George sign a max contract with the Sixers that we both saw coming from a mile away based on that Joel Embiid, Paul George flirting tour that they went on. And then the Knicks traded a bunch of picks for Mikal Bridges. DeJounte Murray is headed to New Orleans in a trade. And in the NBA draft, we saw the Hawks take 6'10" wing Zachary Risachet, #1 overall. And there were a lot of other prospects with promise that were taken after him as well. But with all these off-season moves, we got to break down our top 5 teams who had the best off seasons in the NBA so far. So, Joe, I'm going to kick it to you first, man. Who is number 5 on your list for teams with the best off season so far?
Oh, man, it's so hard, and just to be clear, the best off seasons are not indicative of who's going to be the best team. It's the team that improved the most. And one of the moves I like the best, and you're going to love this. I don't know if it's my 5, but it's so freaking close that I can't really make a decision on 5, but the San Antonio Spurs got themselves a facilitator, and one of the greatest facilitators we have ever seen in NBA history. The Chris Paul acquisition, I understand he's older, he's an aging veteran. What you have to understand is this team was so young, they needed that. They need that leadership, right? You combine Chris Paul's ability to disperse the basketball, right? Distribute that basketball the way he's able to do it. And you saw how good he made players who were one-dimensional in his Clipper days. You saw how good Blake Griffin was, how good DeAndre Jordan was with Chris Paul at the helm. You add in a massive wing player who is listed as a center, plays more like a 4, but can also play the 3 and has the handles of a 2 and a 1, and then you give him someone who can break down defenses, has a very good mid-range jumper off pick and rolls, can distribute the pick and pop very well, plays inside of the structure of an offense very, very well, and isn't great defensively, but has some defensive pressure he can put on the ball. He's a little undersized, like I said, getting older a little bit. But I think that this move for me, I'd say is 15 wins. I think this is a 15-win move for the Spurs. Easy. Right? Like we're going to be talking about a fringe play-in team if we get the best version of Chris Paul in this offense, which I think we're going to. They have enough other defensive presence there to allow that to work. They made some very need-specific draft picks in the draft. I just feel that this team improved the most. And they didn't have to do a lot to do it. I mean, we saw by the end of the year, I think Wemby should have won Defensive Player of the Year. I think he got completely and utterly robbed. You looked at how Rudy Gobert got absolutely taken advantage of in the playoffs against some of the better players, better teams. He was an absolute liability pretty much the entire time he was out there. Wolves were winning in spite of him, not because of him, which is not what you want from a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, especially someone who won it. All those things there, you still have Pop. This is a big grab for them. And it's finally going to see Chris Paul in a place where he fits again, because that Golden State Warriors fit when he got signed there, you and I both agreed, it just didn't make sense. You had like so many guards. What are you doing?
Doesn't make sense.
It just didn't make sense to me. But I'm going to go ahead and give the Spurs my 5. I think the Spurs get my 5. I would have liked them to go a few different directions in the draft. They went more for some things that I thought helped them, but I thought that they could have kind of gone to, with the Chris Paul signing, gotten a little into a Twin Towers sort of setup. They had those picks in those areas to do that they could have gotten. A Klingon was there a few times. You had Zach Edey, who I think, when you saw how he shot at the Summer League, could have really given them another dimension. And as much as I like Wemby at the 5, I prefer Wemby at the 4. That's my preference. I think he'd be a more dominant power forward than he would be a center. And Zach Edey is that powerful center that you really just big body guy, really physical, capable of defending the rim, and it would have allowed Wemby to really space the floor a bit more on both offense and defense, and that would have been more effective in my mind. But they made great choices, and that's why they're my 5.
Yeah, obviously, I love the Spurs offseason. I'm going to get to them very, very soon. But like you mentioned with the Chris Paul signing, I mean, we've seen what he's done to young locker rooms. We saw what he did when he got traded to Phoenix as well. That was a young team that was kind of on the rise. The first year they got him, they end up in the NBA Finals, and then we saw what he did with Oklahoma City when it was, they just got Shea, and it was a lot of those young guys. It was Lou Dort. It was guys like that. And he goes to Oklahoma City and he gets them in the playoffs when nobody expected them to be in the playoffs. So again, as a Spurs fan, I'm going to get into it. I don't like the Chris Paul signing. We're not going to be NBA champions next year. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not expecting that we're getting the 2009 Hornets Chris Paul. That's not what we're getting either. Okay. But we don't need that right now. We need a veteran presence that we didn't have. And the Chris Paul signing obviously is going to give us that. And we signed him to a 1-year, $12 million deal. It's not like we locked up Chris Paul for 4 years and $200 million. We still have so much cap flexibility. We still have all of our draft picks. We still have everything we need to where if another bona fide star does come on the table, hey, we can go get him. We can go say, hey, you want to go play with Victor Wembanyama? We can go get him. Obviously, I'm going to talk about even more here coming up pretty soon, but I absolutely loved the Spurs as far as what they did. But first of all, as far as my number 5 goes, I wanted to give a couple of honorable mentions. And the first offseason I liked is actually the Minnesota Timberwolves. I really, really like this one because of their draft. And we talked about this on the last episode. I didn't necessarily want Rob Dillingham on the Spurs because of his lack of size and his lack of defensive ability. But it's funny how it worked out because the Spurs ended up trading that pick to Minnesota, and I like his fit a lot better in Minnesota. Dillingham can learn from Mike Conley about how to be a pro, can come off the bench, be some instant offense, something they really struggle with in the postseason. We saw they had their offensive struggles in the postseason, especially with their bench. And his defensive issues won't matter as much on the Wolves because they have elite defenders like Jaden McDaniels, and even how much you think about Rudy Gobert, he's still a really solid defender on the interior. So plus, as well, in the draft, they got Terrence Shannon Jr. at the end of the first round as well. He slipped because of his age. He's 23 years old, and because of the off-court legal issues he was having that he was ended up proven innocent of. And listen, he can flat out score, and he was one of the best players in college basketball last year at Illinois. So the T-Wolves got a lot younger and a lot more talented and a lot more scoring off their bench. I like that a lot. And they also got Joe Ingles, who's a vet who can come off the bench and who can shoot. So I really liked the Timberwolves offseason. And Joe, I'm going to give you a deep sleeper for offseason that I actually kind of liked. Give me the Detroit Pistons, okay? Listen, I'm grading the Pistons on a curve here, okay? Most definitely grading them on a curve here because the Pistons are the Pistons and they're a terrible organization, okay? And they had the most cap space in basketball, and they spent that money on Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Simon Fontecchio, and Tim Hardaway Jr. salary dump, okay? Are those great players? No, okay? Those are not great players. Do they make the Pistons in contention for even the play? And probably also no, okay? But for a team that was second worst in made threes last year and 5th worst in percentage and 5th worst overall in offensive efficiency, to add 4 vets who can shoot the 3 at a high level around Cade Cunningham, who is a good young player. Obviously, they gave him his extension too, the $200 million extension. You kind of had to with someone like Cade Cunningham, especially for Detroit. You got money to blow, and he's a young player. You don't want to let a young player go like that, so you kind of had to give him the extension. And those vets are going to help guide the young guys as well. The vets that they added, that's the best Detroit was going to do. You could give like the biggest stars in the NBA $1 billion extra, and they probably still wouldn't go to Detroit. So I think they did the best with what the circumstances they were given. So I want to give an honorable mention to Detroit as well. I think they did about as best as they could do. But as far as my number 5 team goes, I think the Mavs are an offseason winner. They lost Josh Green, they lost Tim Hardaway Jr., as I just mentioned, and Derrick Jones Jr., who are all very important pieces in their run. But I think they upgraded on each of those pieces. They swapped Green going for Quentin Grimes, who both shoots. Josh Green and Quentin Grimes both shoot a very similar percentage from three, but Grimes is thought of as a better shooter, and you got to think that number is going to go even higher with Luka Doncic and Kyrie creating for him. And you swap Clay for Hardaway, that's a no-brainer upgrade for me. Even though Clay isn't what he used to be, you still have that championship DNA, and the ability to hit open shots is going to be huge for Dallas. And then Najee Marshall for Derrick Jones Jr. might sound like they downgraded, but Marshall is also a big wing who's really good defensively, and he's more reliable from the three. So I think the Mavs upgraded their shooting around their 2 stars, and that's something that is very, very important for them to repeat in the run. And it's something that we talked about in the NBA Finals. They didn't have a lot of reliable shooters around Luka and Kyrie. And, it's not a crazy improvement to the team, but again, I think it's enough for them to, when they come in next year, to be one of the 2 main favorites out west. So that was my number 5, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. The reason I didn't put Dallas in my top 5, I just don't trust. I have to see it from Clay. I haven't seen it from him for a while. He's had spurts, and the Mavericks, to me, with some of these moves, they reminded me of some other teams we've seen do this sort of thing, right? We saw the Clippers consistently try to find that other veteran piece, and just it kept plugging in and plugging in and plugging in, and it never worked, right? We've seen this happen with teams multiple times, and realistically, you put the Clippers on there 3 or 4 times, right? They've done it. They went through it with the Chris Paul, Lob City guys. They went through it recently, and it happens all the time. If you get 70% of what Clay used to be in this trade with him on the Mavericks, it's a great acquisition. I couldn't put him there because I've seen what Clay's been. I find him defensively as a liability. I haven't seen him really give the effort sort of there. He kind of doesn't play with the same intensity he did pre-injury, which how can you blame him? And that's why I held him back a little bit on that one. But I can definitely see both sides of the coin, right? Like they've upgraded. You could make the argument that they've upgraded their 3-point shooting. They've gotten a little bigger on the wings, which was definitely a problem against Boston in the finals. They were just outsized. Boston's got one of the bigger 5-man lineups you can run out there. And let's be fair, even Derek White, who's one of the shortest guys in that lineup, still led the guard position in blocks, if I'm not mistaken, per game. So, they saw where they were weak. They've gotten better there, but I just don't know if it's enough in comparison to somehow of these other teams have progressed to really give them a top 5, because it seemed like the moves they made were more light upgrades in comparison to some of the things that a lot of other people did.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it's not crazy upgrades. But again, I think that's what they did last year at the trade deadline when they got their, Daniel Gafford and they got their PJ Washington. It wasn't crazy upgrades, but again, those kind of moves around the margins allowed Dallas to really make that run in the playoffs. And I think what their moves did this offseason, I think it's going to be kind of a similar effect for them. I think they're going to be able to take another step forward. So, yeah, but they are not crazy upgrades, but I think they're going to work out pretty well for Dallas in this upcoming season. But Joe, I'm going to kick it back to you, man. Who's your number 4? Give me your 4th best offseason in the NBA so far.
This is a very young team, and this team desperately needed some shooting, but was one of the best defensive teams in the league. The Orlando Magic got some great players in the door. You got KCP, Caldwell Pope's there now. Great 3-and-D guy, large wingspan, can stretch the floor, shoots the ball very, very well. They desperately needed that shooting. Orlando had one of the worst offenses in the league, and still was a playoff problem for just about everyone they were in it, the entire time. This helps them a lot. I think they got some shooters now. Their defense is going to be there. The floor is going to be a little more spread out there. If Isaac can stay healthy, he can possibly be looked at as a steal for how he was signed. And they didn't really have to dish out a lot of money to these guys. These were all very thought through, planned, deliberate signings that didn't cost them a lot. They didn't have to give up a lot to do these things. And it's going to make them a stronger team. I don't know if they're probably going to be somewhere in the mid 90s in offense. You probably want that closer to the hundreds, somewhere in the low hundreds, high 90s. I don't think they're going to get a lot more out of KCP on the offense. I'm not going to say it's going to be like a 10-point increase or a 10-point swing, but the Magic have done things to improve this team. They've gotten solid role players. They have depth, and they're predominantly a very young team. So this is going to be They have done what we've been waiting the Magic to do for decades, right? Like they had Shaq, he left, and then they were kind of abysmal. Then they got Dwight Howard, and they were consistently, Eastern Conference Finals, Eastern's playoff contenders, and then Dwight Howard fell off and he left, and then they were nothing again. And then now they have, Paulo Banchero and they get KCP in, and this is looking like a Orlando Magic core that now they have some playoff experience. They have this depth there. They have a 3-and-D wing like KCP. The Magic are going to be a tough out this year, and I think these moves put them solidly at my number 4.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 47-win team from last year, so they got 47 wins. You bring in a championship piece, a guy who's been on, 2 of the last 5 championship teams, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So you're going to bring in veteran leadership. You're going to bring in a championship piece, and then on the court as well, like you said, the 3-and-D capabilities that he's going to bring. It's going to be a big add for Orlando, and I think they re-signed a lot of their young guys too. I know they re-signed Franz Wagner to a big deal. Obviously, they're relying on Banchero to take that next step. Jalen Suggs as well. They're relying on him to take that next step. So again, if their young players keep developing, if Banchero takes another step, if Wagner takes another step, if Suggs takes another step, along with KCP being that now 3-and-D wing, I really like that pick, Joe. I think Orlando could be a really, really tough out for someone in the playoffs. I don't know with the kind of the high end, teams in the East now that we got Boston and we got New York looks really good, and Philly, and obviously Milwaukee's still there. I don't know if they're going to beat any of those teams in the playoff series, but again, they could give somebody a 6-7 game series and make it really harder on them, a lot harder on them for the next series. I like that pick as far as Orlando goes. But Joe, at number 4, you talked about them at number 5, and I promise you, I tried to put them higher. I really did. All my bias aside, I wanted to put them at number 1. I simply could not, but I'm going with the San Antonio Spurs at number 4. And speaking of the Spurs at 4, that is where my team drafted Stephon Castle out of UConn, where yes, he cannot shoot yet. I get it. The form looks solid though, and his first 2 summer league games, he looked to be improved as far as his 3-point shooting goes, but his shooting is not there as of yet. And that's a lot of what we needed this offseason to surround Wemby. But his perimeter defense and offensive playmaking has been compared to Drew Holiday. So he's also been a huge component on 2 different NBA champions in the last 4 years. So if Stephon Castle can develop into a Drew Holiday type of player, that is going to be perfect for the San Antonio Spurs. And listen, his basketball IQ, his demeanor, and as far as the fact that he's just a winner going from Bobby Hurley at UConn now to Coach Pop in the NBA, I think Stephon Castle was going to be an awesome Spur. I think he was the exact right pick at 4 for San Antonio. But if the offseason ended there, it would have been disappointing. We still needed vets in shooting, and we got both, like you said, Joe, and Chris Paul, which I called for in the last episode. I said, Wemby and Chris Paul pick and rolls. I need it. And everyone in the chat can vouch for me how hype I was after this signing. And again, everyone, it's not Spurs fans do not think we're going to be winning the NBA title in 2025. Nobody thinks that, okay? But Chris Paul's acquisition could help us maybe reach that in 2027, 2028, 2029, because he's obviously this season at his advanced age going to get Wemby and the rest of the guys easier shots. This dude is literally the king of assist to turnover ratio. He gets a lot of assists and he doesn't turn the ball over, which is what the Pop system has prided itself on for 30 years at this point, okay? So he's going to fit absolutely perfectly with Greg Popovich, with his basketball IQ, and he's just going to show how these guys to be professionals, okay? Which, with all due respect to Cedi Osman, Doug McDermott, and Devontae Graham, Chris Paul is going to be taken much more seriously than any of those guys were last year, because those were the Spurs vets last year, okay? And so is Harrison Barnes as a wing, defender, shooter, and a floor spacer on the court. But again, as an elite veteran presence and leader in the locker room as well, someone most of the league holds in really high regard as an amazing teammate as well. So we basically got him and a pick swap literally for free because we had extra cap space. So didn't have to do anything extra to give up to get Harrison Barnes. And I think he's going to be a very, very important piece of, what basically is going to be a huge rebuilding and huge development year for the Spurs. So again, do I think all those acquisitions lead to NBA title or even a playoff appearance? I don't think you can rule out the playoffs for the Spurs next year, but probably still not in a loaded West. It's going to be tough. There's still a lot of great teams out West. I don't know if the Spurs can make up, we had 22 wins last year. We'll probably need to get to 45 next year. That's going to be tough. We might be able to do it. I don't know if we can. It's going to be tough, but again, the amount of information and growth that our young players will receive from having experience and knowledge of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, it's going to be invaluable. And they added draft assets as well by acquiring, by trading that 8th overall pick and then getting, I think it was a 2031 first-round pick from Minnesota and a couple of pick swaps as well. And just by taking on the Harrison Barnes contract, they got a pick swap. So, again, they have all the flexibility to make a big move if they want to for a big star. And the Spurs objectively just have to be on a top 5 best offseasons in the NBA so far list. They have had a great offseason, Joe.
Absolutely. I mean, you said you went into it a little more than I could because, you follow them tooth and nail through everything. So, I mean, but yes. Yeah, I liked all the moves they did. Everything you said, spot on. Like I said, 10, 15 wins. They're possibly going to be a play-in team. That's where I saw them improving purely off the Chris Paul trade. I think that, or the acquisition. So I'm right there with you. I think, you said they had about 21, 22 wins this year. I could see them getting to 32 to 37 in 2024, 2025. I think that's a solid improvement, a 15-win improvement. That is, you can't argue that team didn't improve that much with these acquisitions at the end of the season if they're 10 to 15 wins better. Right now, someone's going to objectively say, "Oh, that's Wemby. He's improved. He's got his legs underneath him," and I can see that argument as well. But when you look at Chris Paul's stat line, and he's pretty much double, triple the entire season, because that's what he's going to be. If you don't believe that, you're out of your mind. Like, the only thing that's going to hold him back from a consistent triple-double is the fact he doesn't rebound well, because he's not a big guy. But he's going to average 10-plus assists. He's going to be one of the assist leaders now when you have a guy like Wemby there on the wing. And as far as the Castle thing, I had to watch him absolutely decimate my Boilermakers this year in the NCAA final. So, I mean, the guy almost looks like he looks to pass more than to shoot. I think that in this situation with Chris Paul there, they're going to be like, hey, your responsibility is to shoot. He takes care of the ball very well. He's got good handles. He creates for people around him. He can definitely penetrate a defense. So, like I said, everything the Spurs did, there is no way you can argue they did not improve substantially in comparison to some of these other teams.
Big improvements. I'm very, very excited. Last year, I had hope for a lot of the young guys, but obviously, it kind of got shit on right away as far as how it looked from the start because we started playing Jeremy Sohan at point guard. You saw the numbers last year when it was Trey Jones in the lineup at point guard. Like, this team was a plus as far as net rating goes. Like, this with Wemby and Trey Jones on the court, they were a plus. What the hell you think Chris Paul and Wemby are going to be? Like, with all due respect to Trey Jones, he's a good backup point guard, but Chris Paul just coming in with his experience and his basketball IQ, his knowledge for the game, and Wemby, it's going to be a net positive big time while those two are on the court. So it's going to all come down to kind of the minutes without Wemby, and obviously Trey Jones will come off the bench and be important as far as that goes. I think this team is going to be much improved. And again, they were some teams easy win last year. I don't think that's going to be the Spurs this year. They're not going to be any team's easy win this year with Wemby developing, Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, still got our young guys and Stephon Castle, Sohan, Devin Vassell. Obviously, I'm going to be very, very excited. I'm going to be in here hype talking about the Spurs next year. Because it's going to be fun to watch. But, Joe, I got to kick it to you, man. Your number 3. Give me your number 3 best team for the offseason so far.
I want to be honest with you. It's very difficult for a championship team to retain its entire core. It is almost impossible. And the Celtics have managed to do that. They have pretty much gotten everyone back. They are committed to being in the luxury tax. They are willing to pay that money. It is going to happen. And then they go out and they draft Shireman, and I don't know if you've seen tape on this kid.
You shoot.
He can absolutely shoot. He has probably one of the best step back, jumpers I have seen with his handles. And, people have already said he's a Luka-esque kind of guy with the ball in his hand. He can kind of get that space created to get his jumper off, right? Luka everyone knows he's not fast. Luka's not a fast guy, but he uses his body and his lateral motion to create space. Baylor Shearman, I'm not saying he's Luka. He's nowhere close.
I was going to say, you better not be saying he's Luka.
But there are wackos out there like, look, we got our Luka Doncic now. And it's like, bro, pump the brakes. But he does create space very well in sort of that same manner where he's not the fastest guy, but he's got the ball handles to kind of, in lateral motion, and he's got enough length in him to create that space to get that fade, to get that jumper. He does it consistently, uses his body very effectively to get to the rim, uses it, to create space on his layups, to, prevent blocks from happening to him. He's 6'7", 205. I don't really think he's a very large guard. I think the biggest point of this was that we didn't really have the personnel to spell Jaylen Brown. There was a significant drop off from Jaylen Brown to the next best player that could fill in for him. I mean, your best bet at that point was Sam Hauser. And no offense to Sam Hauser, he's a flamethrower when he's on, but he's predominantly a catch and shoot guy. Like, he's not going to be able to create on his own the way Jaylen Brown can. Your offense totally changes out there with Sam Hauser because he's kind of runs that Curry, come off a screen, catch, plop, and he's nowhere near as good of it as Curry is. Otherwise, this wouldn't even be a conversation. So Shearman has that ability to handle the basketball. He plays a pretty solid level of defense. He's a bigger guy. I think that this was looking at it from a Brad Stevens sort of perspective as, like, he shot the ball very well. He plays pretty good defense. He can create on his own in isolation the same way Jaylen Brown can. Once again, not to that level. The kid's just come out of fucking college. Give him a break. But he's got that ability. Now, he's 23 is the reason he dropped. He was a little older. People weren't sure how much more basketball he could grow into. What was he going to look like? Those sorts of things. But, he did at Creighton a lot of things you like from a very good bench guard. He can handle the ball. He can shoot well. He can get to the rim. He passes well, plays good defense. All things Boston covets. And let's be fair, they don't have the choice to go out and, sign a guy like Shearman because they're too expensive. So they get him in the draft. That's where they're going to have to build to keep this run going. But you sign back your core. You get everyone back. You get a ball handling guard who's 6'7", who can shoot the ball very well and kind of spell that small forward to shooting guard, whichever way it goes. Tatum sits down, Shearman can come in at the 3 and you shift some things around at the 4. Brown sits down, Shearman comes in at the 2. I like that mobility there. And if you go watch the tape on this kid, he's amazing. The only reason I can think of that he fell to the end of the first is he's 23. And people don't want to take a 23-year-old, that's not a point guard or a center right. in the first round. So I like the pickups. I like, they got the core back. They were two links and bounds above everybody else. And now we see that they got the core back. They're still at that standard until someone beats them. They're the champs. Everyone's back. They get a kid like Shearman in there. I'm very, very happy with the pick. Very, very happy with the signings. And I know they didn't do anything splashy, right? They didn't sign anybody new.
That was last offseason for them. Last offseason was their splashy offseason. Yep. You
have your entire cores there. Everybody's going to be healthy. Porzingis might miss the first month of the season in recovery, 2 months of the season in recovery. You still got Al Horford, who's not retiring, who still doesn't look like he's slowing down, playing very, very well. KP is going to come back. You have, this solid core, and they're going to make a run again. So this is still the team to beat in the East. They re-signed everyone. The reason they were the team to beat in the East. D. White got his extension. Jason Tatum got his extension. Jaylen Brown showed that he was worth the money, and I apologized to him already on this segment.
Yep.
But that's why they're my 3. It is very difficult to keep them together. But the reason I didn't put them higher is because everyone's trying to catch you, which means there are teams out there who can make splashier moves, and my 2 and 1 spot are reserved for the 2 teams that I think did that.
Yeah, I don't have the Celtics on my list, but I do respect the fact that you have them on yours because, again, it's hard to keep a group like that together. That might also be why the Celtics ownership is now trying to sell their team, is because they have to pay so much damn money to keep the team together. But, I mean, to your point, it's hard to keep the team together, and they got everybody now locked up on long-term deals. Brown and Tatum, obviously, with the massive extensions. Drew Holiday, Dark White gets his big extension, So, and like you mentioned with Shireman, obviously, he averaged 18 points a game in college, 38% shooting from 3, and he averaged 9 boards a game from the guard position, So he's a good rebounder from the guard position, and I think that's going to be really, really important for the Celtics. He could come in and contribute to their success next year, especially as being a veteran is kind of, not he's still 23. He's not old. I think a lot of us get age confused with a lot of these athletes. Like, oh, he's 23, we can't draft him. Like, dude, he's 23. He's not like,
what do you mean?
An old
he's
man.
Not 19.
Yeah, I mean, he's given how long people are playing now, he could still easily have a 15-year NBA career. So, but yeah, so. I think he could come in, especially with him being a more veteran rookie, having more college experience. I think he could definitely come in and contribute to the Celtics as far as next year goes. But Joe, you talked about a team that made a lot of more, talked about teams who made more bigger splashes. And I'm going at number 3 with a team who made probably the biggest splash of the offseason. And I got the Philadelphia 76ers at 3. Honestly, they probably should have been higher, but I love the two teams who had really nice off seasons above them. And we knew it was coming with Paul George to Philly for the 4-year max. It was inevitable after all the flirting between him and Embiid on live television for everyone to see. But I love the fit with him, basically not even having to be the number 2 guy. He could be the number 3 guy in Philly with Embiid and Maxey being ahead of him. And I think his game and where he's at in this stage of his career, I think the number 3 option is perfect for him. And when Embiid inevitably gets hurt next year, hopefully Paul George isn't hurt also at the same time. But Paul George can help their non-Embiid lineups, which were absolutely atrocious last year. We saw when Embiid got hurt, that team was close to the top of the East, and then they went way downhill when Embiid got hurt, ended up in the play-in, So they give Maxey his extension as well. I really liked what they did with their role players as well. Caleb Martin from Miami with big playoff experience on a 4-year deal. Andre Drummond, who isn't great at this point in his NBA career, but a big body who can, again, help the Sixers with their non-Embiid minutes. And I don't know how much Eric Gordon can contribute at this point in his career as well, but he can be a shooter for them as well, space the floor, and he's a veteran presence. So also, I really like their NBA draft. Jared McCain, for all the TikToks and nail polish, is a really, really good player where they got him. And he can come off the bench and obviously not be Maxey, but provide some of the punch and shooting that Maxey provides while Maxey's not on the floor. So, and I talked about it in our last episode as well. Adem Bona, who Philly got in the second round, dude wakes up angry every morning. He plays the game so unbelievably violent. He is super athletic. He's a great defender. And at the very least, he can cause havoc and provide energy for Philly if he gets minutes. So I think Philly had the best offseason they possibly could have had. I think most offseason I'd had them at 1, but I can't put them at 1 because I'm still not sold on PG or Embiid's health. And if one of them is compromised, this team is drawing dead. But I really, really like Philly. They put themselves right atop that tier of contenders fighting for Boston as far as the top of the East.
The funny thing is that I wanted to put Philly on my list. Little spoiler alert, they are not on my list, top 5. My problem is that this is Phoenix Suns 2.0.
Yeah, could be.
You signed a bunch of aging veterans, and Eric Gordon's been on both of those teams now, so congratulations there. And you have health concerns. How well do they fit together? And if you think about it, you had Tyrese Maxey and Embiid. Doesn't this sound a lot like DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker when KD showed up? And Ayton's no longer there. So
obviously Embiid is better than DeAndre Ayton. Let's get that.
And Devin Booker's better. And Devin Booker might be better than Tyrese Maxey. I think at this point we got to put that little. Yeah, we got to put that out the pasture just a little bit. We'll have to talk about that some other time, like which one's better. But it's the same. It's the same concept, right? Like you got, guys who are good, but they have questions. You have guys that used to be good, but aren't anymore. And then you picked up a backup center who sure can rebound really well, but he doesn't run the floor well. He plays drop coverage on everybody because he can't defend the perimeter because he's going to get blown by. And, there's nothing here that really inspired me outside the fact that if Paul George can stay healthy, if Embiid can stay healthy, if Tyrese Maxey can stay healthy, let's be fair, Embiid and Paul George is no different than Kawhi and Paul George.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the season, they're going to be hurt. This team's going to have, on paper, they're great. On paper, the Clippers should have won 6 titles in the last 12 years. All right.
Yeah, so for real.
I wanted to be excited about this. I liked them extending Tyrese Maxey. I liked how he fits in with the Sixers. But I'm sticking to what I said before. I think that the 76ers need to take a long look in the mirror about halfway through this season as the trade deadline approaches and go, if things aren't looking good, right? If Paul George is on the shelf and has been for 2 or 3 weeks and it doesn't look like he's come back for a little while, if the team is somewhere, in the 6 or 7 seed instead of the 2 and 3 seed, you as an organization need to look at Embiid. And I said this, they probably should have did this last year. It's time for him to go. Because I think at this point you build around Tyrese Maxey if things don't go your way. But back to the moves they made before we get into a 76ers rant here. It wasn't enough for me. Like, I was like, you've
Sure.
done, like, you literally looked at all of the other teams that did exactly what you did, and you're like, well, it didn't work for them, but we're different. We're Philly. We have the process.
Well, to be fair to Philly, I think this was probably the only move that they could have made. Paul George was the best max player on the market, and they had a full max slot that they could give. So, they might as well. You might as well put Paul George in there. And again, basketball-wise, it fits. Paul George can shoot. He can be a good defender. But again, I think you compare him to the Suns. I think once the Suns kind of came together, I think we all understood that it wasn't going to work. When the Clippers came together, I think a lot of people thought it was going to work, but it was like, okay, are they going to stay healthy or are they not? And I think that's what it's more similar to is the Clippers, where it's like these guys, if they stay healthy, I think it's going to work. It's just I don't think they're going to stay healthy. So don't get me wrong, I'm not picking the Sixers to win the NBA title next year because of the concerns with Joel Embiid and Paul George's health. But I think if for some reason this is the year they decide to stay healthy in the playoffs, I think it could work for them, So that's why I put them in there, because I think they did the absolute best they could have with the circumstances they were given. But again, I understand your point. I could definitely see this being a Clippers thing where, 5 years from now, we're talking about, if Philly stayed healthy any of those years, they had a chance, but it's like, dude, they didn't, they were hurt the entire time, so
you heard it here. You heard it here, folks. Matt gave the Philadelphia 76ers their participation trophy. You did the best you could, young man. Here's your sticker.
Hey, I mean, it's the moves that they had to do, and they did them. So they got to get props for them. But Joe, I'll kick it to you, man. Number 2 on your list of best NBA teams off seasons. Who you got?
It's so hard to split these two up. I almost want to say this is 1A, 1B.
We might have the same too.
We probably do. There's only 2 choices, and I feel like I should just do them both because I don't know how else to do it. Because if I go, I want to hear it. If you go at 2 and you're gonna be like, how could you put them at 2? They should have been 1. And I'm gonna say my 1. And you're like, how could you put them at 1? They should have been 2. And no matter which way I go, I feel like that's how it's gonna be. It's a lose-lose. But no 2 teams had better moves and did better in this offseason to improve their teams than the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New York Knicks.
Yeah, we got the same thing. Yep.
I mean, there is no way you as a basketball fan, even if I hate the Knicks with a fiery passion. I'm a Celtics fan. Of course I hate the fucking Knicks. But getting Mikal Bridges, you lose Hartenstein, I understand. And we'll get to him in a second.
Yep.
But OG Anunoby's back. Everyone's going to be healthy. And sure, you kind of lose that dominant big man force. I'm going to expect them to pick up a center sooner or later. But you have probably one of the best teams that can match up to the Boston Celtics right now. And health was a big problem for you guys. I think that, minus some game 6, game 7 injuries against the Pacers, you probably go on to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's probably where it ends. I think that series is probably a little more competitive than what we really saw. Like, the Pacers' speed was the biggest problem for the Celtics. I think they really wore them down. However, it still never felt in doubt for the Celtics very much. The Knicks, if there's a team right now to beat the Celtics in the East, the Knicks are my number 1 choice. Like, if I had to pick any team but the Celtics to go to the NBA Finals out of the Eastern Conference, it's the New York Knicks. They have done everything. Like, Mikal Bridges showed he could be a 1. Phoenix letting Mikal Bridges go to the Nets for KD may have been one of the worst decisions they could ever make.
Tough.
And it only probably matches what Dallas did and trading and allowing Kyrie to leave, or bring Kyrie in and getting rid of why am I doing this to myself?
Finney Smith?
Not Finney Smith, Jalen Brunson.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I don't know why it took me so long to think that. Maybe it's because I'm a biased Celtics fan and I just don't like to remember their names. But yeah, Jalen Brunson, sure. Like, you have Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, who literally does not stop playing basketball. I think he plays in his sleep. The guy wakes up, eats, breathes, drinks basketball.
Probably.
Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby. Like, that is an insane lineup.
Yeah.
Insane. Every one of those guys can drop 30. Maybe not Josh Hart, but he can give you 20. But
he had 20 rebounds too.
Yeah, he'll give you a 20 double. So, I mean, it's insane. And then you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. And remember how I said we were going to talk about Hartenstein in a second? Hey, Hartenstein's an Oklahoma City Thunder. And then you add in, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, but the biggest move was Alex Caruso.
Dude, man.
Alex Caruso is a defensive monster.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Lakers let him go, I couldn't believe it. And then he went to the Bulls and balled out for the Bulls consistently.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is a firecracker. He's waiting to just pop off at any minute. He's going to give you defensive intensity. You get your backup big guy in Hartenstein, who's going to be able to spell Chet and still be able to be viable out there. It's really what you were missing. And now the Thunder, I think the Thunder repeat as Western Conference Finals. Like, they're going to be the Western Conference representative. I think this is the year they get over the hump. I think they're still going to be the one seed in the Western Conference. I just don't know, now that they have another year under them, more experience coming together, that core's growing. With moves like this, I don't know who can beat them right now. And they absolutely, like you said, Philly had the moves they needed to make, and they made them, right? The only options they had. These were the options that the Oklahoma City Thunder had to make, and I think that it improved them so much better, which is why I looked at it from, what moves did the best win share, what moves improved the teams the most, what moves had to happen. And that's why I left Philly off, because I felt like Philly, even with the moves they did, the bar didn't move for them. I still think they're going to be where they're at, right? I don't think they're going to be the 2 seed, because I don't think they can beat the Knicks. I don't think they're going to be the 1 seed, because I don't think they can beat the Celtics. So they're like a 3 or a 4 seed. And that's where they're at. I guess they were like a 6 seed last year, so that's a little bit of an improvement. But we at the same time always thought was like, hey, they're a 3 or 2. It's the Celtics, Bucks, and the 76ers. That's how it's been for the last 5 years. Or it's been some, mix and match of those 3 teams. Oklahoma City and the New York Knicks, the moves were better. The players are in a better point in their careers. And I think in a 7-game series right now between those 3 teams, mix and match them, round robin it, I don't think the 76ers win a single series between the Knicks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that they might be competitive, but they're going to go, they're not winning a single one of those series, no matter how they max up. In fact, match them against any of our other top 5 teams. The only team the 76ers probably beat, the San Antonio Spurs.
No,
and you had the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, the honorable mention Pistons. Yeah, but I mean, I'm with you though. I mean, as far as who had a better offseason, I had Philly at 3. The 2 teams I had at 2 and 1 were the same. I had who did I have at 2? I had the Knicks at 2, and I had Oklahoma City at 1. So again, I'm not mad at anybody who's got the Knicks at 1 and Oklahoma City at 2, but I had the Knicks at 2 and the Oklahoma City at 1. Listen, as far as the Knicks at 2 goes, you said a lot of what I was going to say, Joe. And by the way, as far as these 2 teams having the best off seasons, I'm not going to be shocked if this is the NBA Finals next year. If it's Oklahoma City and the Knicks, obviously I think the Celtics deserve to be the favorite in the East. They should be the favorite in the East based on what they did last year. But I'm not going to be surprised if the Knicks end up beating them in a 7-game series. Because like you mentioned, Joe, this team, I'm going to talk about it too. This team literally just constructed themselves to beat the Boston Celtics. That's what this offseason was to beat the Boston Celtics. And I think they might have the pieces to do it. But first of all, like you, Joe, this is a team that I have not believed in wholeheartedly in a long time, because they were so poorly run for such a long time that you kind of got to keep them at arm's length. Like, all right, whatever they're doing, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But clearly they've turned it around, and this team is going to be a legit threat in the East for years to come. And obviously they gave up a haul for Mikal Bridges. They gave up however many picks. I think it was 6 picks for Mikal Bridges. But he's an amazing fit for that team, not only with the added Villanova connections that Hart, Brunson, and DiVincenzo he has with them, but because of his defensive tenacity, that will fit right in with Tom Thibodeau and the rest of those guys. In Phoenix, this dude was Defensive Player of the Year runner-up. Okay, he can flat out guard. And he can score pretty efficiently as well. As we saw in Brooklyn, I think his first, I don't remember how many games it was. I think his first 30 games with Brooklyn, he was like 25 points per game on 50, 40, 90. He obviously wasn't nearly as efficient last year, but he was still very efficient. And like I said, he is just going to be an elite 3-and-D option for them. I bet he's probably going to, tick down his scoring a little bit because Jalen Brunson's going to be there, obviously. And they re-signed OG Anunoby. Obviously, he's another elite 3-and-D option who might have been overpaid and is an injury risk as well. But we saw how valuable he was for New York last year. Their record with him, including the playoffs, was 23-4. They were 23-4 as a team with OG Anunoby. And even with Anunoby, there were a lot of games they were without Randall. They were without other guys as well. So he makes a massive difference for them. And I think they clearly saw what the Brown-Tatum combo did in the playoffs and said, we need 2 guys who can stop that. Bridges and Anunoby are those guys. Plus, they got a top 10 player in Jalen Brunson to take an $120 million haircut for the team's sake. I tried to put them at 4 because they lost Hartenstein, but Brunson's extension, Bridges and Anunoby, it's been a home run offseason for the Knicks. And Joe, I wanted to kick it back to you as far as the Knicks go. Obviously, there's been some talk about Julius Randle as well. We've seen Julius Randle in his playoff performance. What do you think they do with Julius Randle? Do you think they hang on to him? Do you think they move him and try to get a big man and some bench piece? What do you think they do with Julius Randle?
See, that's a big question because if Julius Randle's healthy and you look at how this team's constructed, they're missing some size, but I like Julius Randle on this team. I think Julius Randle on this team, he brings a ferocity that I like. Mikal, like I said, Mikal Bridges defensively is a baller. Mm-hmm. Offensively just as good. I think Julius Randle may be kind of repetitive here, but if you can keep these guys in a solid rotation and keep them healthy and you have defensive stalwarts like that, like I wouldn't be surprised if you look at this, and it's a 25 minute split and they're just rotating these guys in, right?
Maybe.
Julius Randle on this team is a viable piece. And I think he's still very, very, has a lot of game left in him. And, I just don't know if you want to give up a chance because whatever you get back for Julius Randle isn't helping you this season. There's one player I could see. There's one player I kind of would like to see round this out, and it's another Brooklyn Net. I think Nick Claxton in a Knicks jersey makes so much sense. The Nets have not wanted to move Claxton because he's a younger guy. He's very, very aggressive. But the Knicks without Mikal Bridges now, they're not winning anytime soon. Right? Like Mikal Bridges kept them viable for as long as he could. If they're looking to shop Nick Claxton and you can give up, a Julius Randle and maybe like you get a pick back or something like that, or however that works out. But that's the move I see them making. Hartenstein's left a void. They don't really have that guy. I was surprised, that they didn't really address that sort of idea in the draft. But I like Nick Claxton there. I'm trying to figure out who else they could possibly get, but it just there has to be something, and there has to be somebody that they can go get. But you start looking at their draft class here, like who did the Knicks get in the draft? They got back home Dadi, French wing. Yeah. Kolek, who
I like Kolek a lot.
Yeah, I like Kolek a lot, but he's 6'2", good facilitator. Sure. He's not a center. They didn't get anybody to really fill out this roster. They didn't get a center. Like you had Klingon, you had Edie, you had bigs available, right? That could play. And you didn't get them. And so now that's the one probably knock on the Knicks I have here. And if they were to move Randall, it has to be for a viable big. But
yeah,
who's a big you could get that's going to offer you the offensive and defensive capabilities outside of Nick Claxton for Julius Randle.
Well, I heard some talk this offseason about the Bucks were possibly shopping Brook Lopez. That would be a perfect fit for the Knicks with his ability to stretch the floor and his defensive ability in the paint. But I don't know if the Knicks would, or I don't know if the Bucks would be willing to give the Knicks what they wanted, considering that's one of their top East rivals at this point. So. But yeah, that would be a good fit. I don't know. I would have to do more research into that as well, as far as what other options they could get. But I'm with you, Joe. If they could get if that type of player, whether it be like a Nick Claxton or a Brook Lopez or somebody in that vein for Julius Randle, maybe, the other team has to throw something in or vice versa, obviously just to make the salary work and make the trade work. I think I would do that because, like you said, I think Julius Randle's a little bit repetitive as far as how their lineup goes right now. So, but it's gonna be interesting to see. I want to see how they look with Julius Randle on the court first, and then kind of go from there. But it'll be interesting.
I'll tell you one other one. Brandon Ingram's being shopped right now in rumors, and so is Jarrett Allen.
Oh yeah, Jarrett
Allen in a Knicks jersey sounds pretty choice.
Jarrett Allen. If the Knicks get Jarrett Allen, you might be in trouble over there.
Oh yeah, it'd be cooked. It'd be done.
You might be in trouble, dog. That would be crazy if they went and got Jarrett Allen. I mean, I think they still have the picks to go get him. It would be interesting to see how the salaries worked out. Them going to get Jarrett Allen, but like I said, Brunson just took 120 million or whatever he did to help keep this team together. So they're going to have extra room to get players they wouldn't have been able to normally get. It's going to be interesting to see. We talked about number one. I mean, number one was OKC for me. I mean, they didn't have the craziest offseason additions, but like you mentioned, Joe, they added the exact pieces they needed, and they gave away literally nothing while doing it. They added Alex Caruso, one of the best 3-and-D guards in basketball, and they didn't have to give up any picks to get him. Just Josh Giddey, who they were looking for a reason to get off of after his on-court struggles last year and all the off-court drama last year as well. Didn't involve any picks. Amazing trade for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they still have 7.7 million first-round picks that Sam Presti has been hoarding over the last 10 years in case they do want to make a run at another star, if another star comes available. And obviously they signed Hartenstein as well to a contract that might have been a little bit expensive, but it's not going to look that bad because, again, the salary cap for the NBA is going to keep going up and up and up. And we saw in the playoffs last year, they did have a hard time on the glass, that being Oklahoma City. They had a hard time on the glass. His presence and his size next to Chet Holmgren. You talked about the Spurs potentially adding a 5 alongside Wemby, and you could definitely play Holmgren and Hartenstein on the floor at the same time because Chet can space the floor, and it could allow Chet to roam more at the 4, block some more shots, and they can play big at times. So I really, really thought it was an awesome offseason for them. Awesome signing with Hartenstein. And I was going to put them at number one strictly because of those two moves, getting those players and not giving up anything for them. They also drafted Nikola Topic, who before his injury was the number one overall pick, or in discussions for the number one overall pick. And they picked him at 12th overall. Now he's probably going to be out for next year in its entirety because of a torn ACL, but he's a 6'6" point guard who's an elite playmaker, passer, and a floor general. He's basically a better version of Josh Giddey. So they basically lost nothing, literally nothing, and acquired pieces that fit their team perfectly, that have playoff and Caruso's experience, championship experience, and they will still have plenty of assets to acquire literally any other piece that they want. Oklahoma City is set up to make a run right now. And to me, they are the favorites out west. I agree with you, Joe. I think they're the favorites to make the finals out west. And I think they had easily the best offseason of any NBA team this year.
Absolutely. Everything you said was 100% exactly what I was thinking. I don't see how all the weaknesses that they had, all the problems that they had, they address and did so in such a manner to where, like you said, they walked in with house money and left with somebody else's house. It was insane. They didn't even come to the table with their own cash. They brought somebody else's money, won money, and just pocketed everything and left, because that's essentially what they did in free agency and the draft. And they got rid of all of their problems and essentially are just like, well, now it's time to go take care of business. And that's exactly what I think they're going to do.
I agree. Yeah, no doubt. It's a amazing offseason for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The fact that all their core is as young as they are, and they were already the 1 seed in the West last year and already in the position that they're in this year to make another run is insane. And, if you're an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, you got to be ecstatic with where your team is at right now, because you guys are in an amazing place going forward for the NBA. But that was the best off seasons for NBA teams. For the NBA in this offseason. And again, there were a lot of really, really great ones. Next week, we are going to talk about the worst off seasons for all the NBA teams, because there have certainly been some really, really bad off seasons that we want to talk about as well. But for the best off seasons, that is going to be it for us today here for the Brick House, partner of the House Call Sports. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, shout out to the rest of our sponsors. That's Coffee Bros, Vivid Seats, SportMemorabilia.com. I want to give a shout out to Lids for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys so much. And again, go check out Lids. Go check out all of our sponsors. The links are going to be down in the description. And be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms as well at the House Call Sports. We got Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, Twitter. We're up on Threads. We've got merch. You can meet our crew, and we've got blogs up on our website. Our website is www.thehousecall.com. And that's going to be it for us. Peace.